am here today with Sarah Gross. Sarah is VP of Global Enablement at RingCentral. And Sarah, it's so great to have you here.
Likewise, Lori, we go way back to when my name was Sarah Frick.
Yes, I'm sure I may say that at some point, but
That's okay.
hopefully I say your name now. But I think it was 20, I don't know, 18 maybe?
Yeah.
Uh,
I was a recent college grad. I was having a great old time in DC.
yeah.
We're on the other side of that now. Now I'm a mom. It's crazy.
Right. It's so exciting. Yeah. So we have a lot to talk about. But back then you were with Gartner. And I remember that Salesforce had panels about women in sales all around I was fortunate enough to do a few of them, and I got to come to DC and do this one. When I remember you on the panel, I remember the other panelists, and you were all so confident. And I distinctly remember that was the location where there was a woman in the audience who said something like, "How do you get that confidence?" And that was one of the first times I noticed when the panelists were all, because it's like, you've been confident for a long time. And I want to make sure we touch on that because I hear it at a recent conference I was at this past week as well, where people were asking about building confidence and being just really solid in your knowledge and in your work. Do you have any, I don't know if you remember that or if you have anything to share about that before we dive in about your history a little bit?
Yeah. Confidence is one of those things that it is hard to teach someone, even to answer that on a panel. I always tell the folks that I mentor, know your brand. And when you feel really confident around that brand, create your story. And that is what builds your confidence because telling your story immediately builds your credibility. And when you're credible, you're going to be confident. So I've always been a big fan of storytelling throughout my career. And even when I was a little kid, I used to come and pitch my parents somewhere I wanted to go on vacation or whatnot in the living room. And I remember back to that, my dad's a lawyer, my mom's a doctor, and they would always be like, we got to go into X career because of X, right? And I ended up in sales because I was a strong storyteller from the very beginning. I'm a big fan of know what your brand is or what you want it to be and start to write your own story. That's what confidence is to me.
That's great. I actually use the arts because I remember my sister and I both did a crayon drawing for my parents about why we should get a dog. And we were talking about dogs before we started recording, and we were selling our parents on how well we would take care of the dog. And
What did you have to be confident about then, though? You had no money. You had no, you had no concept of what taking care of a dog should be. You told the story of the why,
yeah.
right? And that gave you the credibility that you could have that responsibility and you could take care of that dog.
Yeah, and it's interesting. People, it's a male focused term, fake it till you make it, because I think a lot of women don't like the idea of faking things, but fake it till you believe it. I've heard that as well too. And at some point, you just have it. You feel that confidence and you realize, I still do this to this day. I'll go into some big executive thing and I think I know more about my subject matter than anybody in there. It doesn't matter how executive they are, how C-level or executive board head they are. I know my subject matter. And
Your
when
brand.
people, yeah, so that's really important. I'm glad we talked on that a little bit. Did we ever talk about how you started? Because I know you were at Vorsight and you were like a leader there, right? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
I graduated in one of those really fun financial crises. But in all seriousness, I shared I came from a family where you got a degree, but I had graduated from an international business school and kind of felt like I needed to see the world before I did an MBA program or get my degree, if you will, in that thing. And so I came out of school and said, I don't know a lot about anything. So let me just take a job in a big city where I can get exposed to lots of different folks. I had traveled got to university in Barcelona, and I was a big fan of the more cultural experiences you get, the more well-rounded you are and the better decisions you make. So DC felt like the melting pot of all of the places. And Vorsight was hiring, and the role was really cool because I got to be a BDR for a lot of different sales reps. So I got to see what a lot of different people did, what different industries, how companies were set up, why they were set up, what go-to-market structures looked like. And I had this weird knack where I was able to figure out, especially I think this is the woman in me, right? How to multitask my different salespeople to get them to enough places because a lot of them were live meetings we were setting up and to smack their calendar. So I ended up being the top performer. I think Steve and David would collaborate. I still am. And my best month was like 62 meetings or something crazy that I finagled all my reps being in different places. I was making a lot of money to the point where my dad, I think, thought I was like dealing drugs or something. And he was like, "What are you doing over there?" I was like, "Dad, I'm really good at this sales thing. I think I'm going to try to sell appointment setting." So Steve and David started to expand the business. They were like, "We need someone to do this full time." And so I had this cool opportunity to run like our sales function, but I also owned CS. So I had to keep people happy and keep the numbers and adjust the BDRs on the schedule in the right way. And so I started to really feel like what it feels like to own a sales bag. I went on to have a couple of sales bags and then I ended up at corporate executive board where right then, pre Gartner, if you will, the executive board was rolling out Challenger sale. But we were having this really big issue where Challenger was getting adopted, but not embedded into the culture. And so there was this ongoing training, if you will, issue. And so I got plopped into a project to try to figure out, okay, what does that look like? How could we create an ongoing learning program? And I was working with the John Strokers of the world and running our large enterprise business group. And so I was doing enablement. We were calling it ops at the time, but I was doing enablement in the sense of how do we take a productive rep and replicate him or her? How do we take what one good customer looked like from a rollout and standardize that and put it into a cadence, right? It was all the fun things that became this enablement world. Yeah. Got married and did all those fun things. I said, DC, I've had a great decade. Loved you. But I'm not 20 anymore and I can't be out till 4 a.m. And also my husband had gotten into his residency. So we moved down south and I ended up at RingCentral, which has been a fantastic journey of just basically me and an enablement role and growing out a team of about 50 folks that are dedicated to segment, they're dedicated to partnerships, they're dedicated across different channels that we're going through. It's been a lot of fun. And I think enablement is one of the best things that has happened to the working environment because it used to be like, I'm a sales manager and I have a dashboard and a quota. I better be successful. Now you've got this layer that's looking at things from a different lens than you are and helping you think about what does your team need the next quarter and the quarter out from there.
Yeah, I was an early adopter of the Sales Enablement Society way back when. That was a while back too. And I remember the whole premise of the organization initially. I don't know what all they're doing today, but initially it was just like there are no standards or no guidelines or no definition. The only definitions are being provided by vendors. And it was a perfect opportunity for an organization to say, to help arm people with knowledge so that they could go back to their company and say, if you want me to also do the onboarding training, I'm going to need to do less of this other thing, or we're going to need to hire more specialists because it's encompassing, don't you think? Enablement can be pretty broad.
I call it the octopus of the organization because it is really the only department that touches every other department.
Yeah, which is cool and can definitely affect the revenue in the organization like nothing other than salespeople and the sales motion.
Well, a lot of enablement started to expand to the entire customer journey. Anybody touching the customer, right? That's the role I have the pleasure of being in. So it's interesting the way I've adjusted. Yeah, you can impact the net initial sale, but how do I educate the team on what NRR is and why does that matter to the company? And how do I think about the retention? What are the levers, right? That we normally would look at in the pre-sale cycle, but in the post-sale cycle that we should build in pre-sales to make the most successful customers. How do I think about support and what the escalation path should be for a customer? Now that enablement defines that, but we should be educating across everybody touching the customer, what those look like so that they have the opportunity to make our customers as successful as possible. So the reason I like enablement pulls from finance, from legal, from marketing, from HR, is we have to communicate those things amongst the team as the baseline than it is what training does each role need and how do you layer on the what success is if that person's doing that role for the
Yeah, you're like the glue, aren't you, to
company.
connecting everybody together.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Yes, so. And I would think that you need to have sales leaders that you respect in a case like that, and people that I guess you need all the leaders. You need to have good working relationships with all the departments, wouldn't you?
It's a lot about relationship building for sure. Um,
Ideally. Yeah.
I think the other piece is it's a level of trust because a lot of enablement is verify and then wait deal, right? You have to teach them, but you can't immediately go measure that someone actually is trying that motion, right? You got to give them time and then you have to tailor it along. So enablement is a long-term. So it's a really big relationship with your CRO because you're not going to close the deal that quarter. You're going to help him see the deal that they didn't know that they could bring in next quarter, or you're going to help him or her understand what gap of knowledge in a product that does the team have that they need to fill in order to be able to get the future quarter line.
Yeah, and in the old days of sales, it was really just lagging indicators that we would look at and think about what we would do next time differently. So it's really come a long way. It's exciting. One of the things when you worked at CEB and then it became Gartner is that CEB was really good at doing surveys about women in sales. I think they were one of the most credible sources that I saw that
Mhm.
had statistics, that had actual data about the lack of women in sales and the poor pay, the differences sometimes in pay discrepancies. And I really admired that about CEB. And then Gartner kept doing it, and they have continued to do that, which I really like. In enablement, they're more women, though, right? It's not the issue like the frontline sales roles necessarily.
Yeah, there are. Lori, I'll tell you, I'm not proud though of some of the ways that I see women in enablement that are more in a EA role or chief of staff that we're calling enablement. So here's what I'll say is I think that we still need to continue to build women in sales revenue roles. And I think enablement is absolutely one of those. I would just caution that as we build up the brand of enablement, we really separate out what is enablement versus what is chief of staff, what is an
Right.
executive assistant, what is a PMM role, and make sure that we build up our profession in the best ways. And I'll tell you, I haven't always been great at this in my career. It's so easy to say yes, especially when you know you can create an impact.
Right.
But we need to start saying, yeah, let me work with your EA to structure that. Let me work with the PMM team, right? They're responsible, but I'm absolutely will provide input. I call it the yes, but if
Yeah.
you will, so that we start to build it out. So I think there ended up being more women in quote unquote enablement roles. I'd be really interested after this last economic downturn, how that's shaked out. Cause I'm seeing
Me
a lot of
too.
the enablement roles then people are getting hired into as men at the front of things.
Yeah, and I've
Um,
actually seen a number of senior leaders who are female who have left big companies. Some have gone off on their own. It'll be interesting. I'm very curious. I hope that companies like Exactly and Gartner and others will continue to get data. LinkedIn did one in I think it was 2014. They did a women in sales thing and they haven't done it since then, but there is data out there that we can use because women bring a great lens. We bring a different perspective. We're important. Like you were talking about being a mom now. Think of what now as a mom that you didn't have before and that you didn't gain that until you went through all that. And it's something that it adds to the layers of the role and it adds to the results, I'm sure.
yep. What I think is COVID didn't do women a great service.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I'm seeing. And a lot of women that were be able to be successful is because of some of the more flexible work agreements that are no longer in place. And so with inflation at its high and less women in the workforce than ever, I do worry. I think the biggest thing I coach and the women around me to do is have your really strong brand, right? Because you can continue to be a remote hire as long as your brand is strong. People will always go to bat for you if that's the case. I encourage women to stay in the workforce, even if it is at a different type of role and function. I ended up leaving one place. You can see that on my resume and coming back at a different level. And that's by design. Listen, I was here fighting at what we call an EVP level, right? We're below a VP.
Mhm.
And I knew that I was just as credible as my male VPs. And I said, hey, I'm leaving and it's for X amount more money and the title that I've been walking through. And this is what I deserve. And you got to get me there. And people will say, you got to put in the time, you have to go through the levels. I get it. And I don't think that men or women are judged differently on like the levels and all the time and all that jazz. 'Cause HR typically controls it. But I do think women tend to work above and beyond in certain roles aren't necessarily recognized at that and pushed forward at the same rate. If you know your brand, tell your story and get people to listen to your story. That's at where men boast. I say women should tell their story. That's typically what we're more comfortable with.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. Men tend to boast. I always think of it like a lot of men, not all. We have some great allies. Many of them listen to these episodes. So I appreciate that. Thank you, men. Appreciate you so much. I think that a lot of men want to be on Mount Rushmore. Women, I think of my friend Jill Conrath. She wrote 4 great books about sales, and then she said, I'm done. And she didn't need to make a movie or make videos or sell other products. She done. And that unfortunately, the women coming up now don't know who she is. That's the downside of it. But we definitely look at things in different ways. And that's a good thing. I think that's one of the greatest sayings is when we can bring all those different viewpoints together. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And or just look at something with a more calm demeanor. And I'm not that this is not an implication that men go in angry. I'm simply just saying that I really feel that the women I work with are able to see something from a couple different lens all at the same time,
Yeah.
therefore come in with a more rounded perspective. So I really encourage the gentlemen around me to use me to just think about something from a couple different angles, especially as a mom. You have to think about what size clothes are they wearing next? What food should they eat tonight? How do I do this? How do I do that? I'm always triangulating, right? My next step. And that's a strength of mine versus having a decisive in the moment action that isn't. So you have to take those two things and use them together in the workplace to make the best decisions as quickly as possible.
And then it works really well. That's a
Uh,
beautiful thing when you have all those perspectives together. It's amazing.
That's what I loved about my career at RingCentral. Like I am the only woman on our CRO's direct reports, but I'm surrounded with men that really value that perspective, that pick up the phone and say, here's what I'm going through, Sarah. I'm tempted to do X very quickly. Help walk me through what you might do and take a step differently. I have a CRO who will turn to me and say, you're best positioned to message this to the team because you have a level of respect and here's why.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I'd love to see another female on the leadership team with me, and we have at different points, but I also respect that I don't need to be surrounded by people that look like me all the time. I need to be surrounded by people that respect me. And I truly believe that we have that amongst our team. That's my biggest thing is I want more women in the workplace and in senior leadership positions 100%. We need to keep doing the research. We need to keep pushing forward. But the biggest thing is let's create the best working environment because then people are going to realize I need more people that look like Sarah. And then they start to bring more people in and it's the hiring profiles. I'm really proud with some companies out there. And when you do have a female on your leadership team, don't put her in a box and say, oh, Sarah's only good at these things. Have her as part of the conversation because you never know, even if you're talking about FedRAMP, who knows what perspective I might have, even though FedRAMP's not in my full background of setting it up and structuring.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's really important. And I wonder, in addition to really knowing your brand, what else has helped you to get into more executive positions, do you think?
A big thing I try to employ is I'm not going to put something together for somebody else to present it. If someone is asking you for something, say, hey, walk me through where this came from. What would be the ideal next steps coming out of it? Structure the content, but structure it and say, hey, Lori, I think that's a great thing. I'd love to tackle that with you. Can we co-present how we're going to attack this issue together?
Mhm.
Right? It gets you the seat at the table in these big conversations and shows that you're then accountable for the follow-up steps. And it puts you in a position to really shine.
Has that
I think
happened to you in the past where someone took your idea and ran with it? I bet it hasn't.
unintentionally,
Has
yeah. I've put a slide together and then they've presented it. And then they said, okay, Sarah, you have to execute on this. I do all the work and then it's presented up again. And so I got good at saying, what is the thing we want to accomplish in doing this? And if so, I'm going to be the DRI on it. Okay, I'd like to be part of the conversation. So I make sure that it's all aligned.
That's great. What is a DRI?
Directly responsible individual.
I like it.
Like a person doing the shit.
Yeah, I like it. DRI.
Yeah.
That's great. What do you read, or you're a busy mom? What do you listen to, anything, podcasts or learning, or how do you learn? How do you grow?
Yeah, I used to have a ton of things I'd go to all the time. LinkedIn is definitely still a source for me. As I think about kind of podcasts in the world, I honestly, as a mom, a little bit, I've used those to get out of my work mindset. I
Yeah.
like a lot of murder podcasts,
Mhm.
but I've also been listening to T-Boy. I don't know if you've listened to their podcast. It's on Wondery, and they give a really good, super honest landscape of what's going on in the tech industry, what's just going on in the world, and why,
Oh,
and what's the reasoning behind it. I like a lot of like, how do we get to the why? I think
yeah.
there's a lot going on. Like, why are there not more women in sales leadership? Pandemic happened, everybody were remote, your kids started staying home, your daycare was closed. All of a sudden, we're back into the working world where men just walked out of the house and were like, cool.
Yeah.
And we're still trying to create this balance. And daycare's tripled in cost,
Uh,
and you're not in a place where you can, but you can't really now. Remote work means you're on all day, every day, in back to back meetings. You can't multitask like some people did during COVID, right?
right.
And so we're back in this working world, and there's not a lot of quote unquote part-time jobs that you can
Right.
balance things. So what do we do about it? We encourage teams to create and structure roles that could use the talents of our hybrid workplace. I've been using remote contractors, writers in
Yeah.
different ways, right? That are women that can work part-time. And I purposely look for moms and in a lot of scenarios so that I can use folks that I know want to work, but maybe that's not the right time for them. I have a 1-year-old without a lot of help from my husband and my mother-in-law and my mom and daycare. Like, I couldn't do it all. I'm in a
Right.
lucky scenario, but not everybody can do that. So try to look for places in which you could take in part-time and purposely look for a demographic that could fill that.
Did having your own child give you more empathy for moms and dads too in the workplace, or just a different perspective?
Gave me a different perspective on the post 5 PM
After
conversation.
5, after, yeah, 5 o'clock.
Honestly, gave me like I'm really proud of myself, candidly, of being able to prioritize what's most important. My boss called while I was doing daycare pickup or drop off this morning. And normally I'd answer and maybe sit in the parking lot with her a little bit longer, or would have done this before if I was like waiting to go to a coffee shop. And
Yeah,
now I picked up and said, hey, I'm doing drop off. I'll call you back in 30. It's a level of confidence that I didn't have before to control those boundaries of what I can and can't do. And I look back and there were so many women before I had a baby that did that, that I was, oh, slacker, or what is she thinking? Like they might not, you may never connect with them again. What if they don't get the next steps? But at the end of the day, you are a better worker and you're more strategic in the way and when you spend your time. And I really applaud all the ladies who did that before me, moms and dads alike. And it's one of those things I look back, God, I should have helped more. And I always did. I always had bosses who had kids and I'd help cover for them in places because I knew that they had to do the pick off or the drop off. But I didn't realize the way in which how much smarter they were during the work day to get
yeah,
things done.
'cause you have to be, right?
Yeah.
Gotta be strategic. Yeah, that's
Yep.
great. Love that. All right, Sarah, we're going to be looking to see all the new and exciting things in your future as time goes on. It's been really fun knowing you for as long as I have and seeing you up the corporate ladder. And
I always refer to there were the Jills and the Lories. There was Jill Conrad, Jill, who made it get
yes,
Lori.
yeah,
And so you were the women setting the foundation for me to get into
oh,
my next piece. And I hope that I can continue that tradition for all of you ladies and keep raising the next women of the workforce.
that's great. Can people reach out to you through LinkedIn?
Of course. And if you don't know Jill Rowley, you should
Yeah.
Google her and read because there were a lot of foundational things that were put into place to create being a rock star woman in sales.
Yeah, that's great. And people can reach out to you.
Yeah,
And
please do.
that's great.
Especially if you want to talk enablement. It's my love language.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Sarah Gross, thank you so much for being here and continued success in all you're doing.
Likewise. Thanks, Lori.